Alex, apologies for interrupting you.
Say that, you know, Steve, just interviewed Stephen, obviously the concentration is in where the kids are going to be all right. You did very well there. I mean, it's, you know, your local MP, potential tragedy in your constituency, finding the words to express things. It's always tricky. Stephen did very well.
Yes, I think he did, and we're grateful for him for coming on. Let's talk to you, first of all, about the events of yesterday up in Edinburgh. We had the handing over of the Scottish Honours, I think it's called, isn't it?
We never even got paid for them.
No.
I resent this, handing over for nothing.
Yes, and I heard you on Jeremy Carl's show the other night talking about the £22,000 replacement sword. Is it really the case that the old sword was literally falling about and couldn't be held up for fear that it might collapse?
Yeah, but it's history. I mean, look, the Sword of Scotland was presented to James IV by Pope Julius in 1507.
By the way, I must say I was incredibly impressed by your historic knowledge of all of this, because I'm sitting there sort of in the car wrapped by this, and I tried to repeat it, and I got it wrong, because I was trying to remember who it was that was being chased by Cromwell.
Well, that was a bit later.
Yeah.
But the Pope Julius was called the Warrior Pope, and he was trying to get James IV into the Papal Wars, on his side, obviously. So he sent him this lovely sword. And this is authentic history. Now, it's had, you know, that sword was actually chased. It was hidden from Cromwell's dragoons in the northeast of Scotland. It was broken in two to be smuggled out in the underskirts of a serving lady to keep it away from Cromwell. But so, the point I'm making is it wasn't intact through its history. It was mended. And you could mend it again. Because it's real, it's authentic,
surely
it's
that's
history.
the point, yeah.
And, you know, giving Charles a 22,000... But now, no disrespect to the craftsmen in historic Scotland, who I'm sure did a marvellous job. But let me tell you, I know for a fact that King Charles doesn't need an extra sword.
He doesn't.
He really doesn't. He's got quite a few.
Yeah.
And it sends a whole volume of messages in a time of austerity to say, right, we'll just spend 22,000 quid on a sword. It's entirely wrong.
And who actually paid for the sword then?
Oh, the Scottish Government.
So it came out of the budget for the Scottish Parliament? Or...
If I'd been First Minister, it got short shrift, I can tell you, I can promise you.
They've had a bit of trouble passing their accounts recently, so, I mean,
well, they've been...
maybe they've just smuggled it in on the side.
Well, I suppose, compared to the money on the ferries, it doesn't seem very much. But look, it sends a bad message, in my opinion. Now, I mean, also a bit of ingenuity. I mean, the Diamond Jubilee back in, when was that, 2011?
Yeah.
I gave Her Majesty the Queen an absolute digitalised facsimile of the 2011 census in Balmoral, which she pored over for hours. Because she could recognise the names from when she was a child in the 20s, the names of the people in the Balmoral estate. She was fascinated by it. Total cost of that digitalisation, a couple of £100 quid. Just use a bit of imagination. If you want to give a gift, a present to your sovereign, these people are not short of a bob or two. They've got everything that wealth and luxury can buy. Give them something original.
Yes. Well, it's like buying presents for people. My sister, for example, who's got pretty much everything she's ever wanted, and I always buy her something like a nice bottle of wine or something, rather than bothering to buy some bauble.
But that's just your excuse.
Well, then I get to drink it with her, it's true. But I mean...
Talking of baubles, instead, you do realise that the Scottish crown jewels, which were given over...
Which are apparently the oldest crown jewels in the nation, right? I use that word advisedly.
The second oldest in Europe after Hungary. But the key thing from a Scotland-England point of view, as you'll appreciate, is they're substantially older than the baubles in the Tower of London.
Yes, indeed. So, isn't it a bit ironic, though, that the SNP, as the Scottish Government, albeit that they're in cahoots with the Greens, are giving a gift at all to the King, given that... their position on the royal family is a bit muddled, it seems to me, because they want independence, but they still want to have the crown as the head of the state, do they?
Well, that's a perfectly defensible position, and it's a position I adopted when Queen Elizabeth was Queen of Scots.
Right, but that's not your position now.
No, because it would have been insanity to argue against deposing someone like Her Majesty the Queen, whose lifetime of service was impeccable. Political suicide. But it was a reasonable position. I just think now, when you're talking about things and thinking about a new Scotland, a new independent
country... So your position then was pragmatic, then, in other words?
Yes, it was pragmatic. And so happens the Yusuf's position now is pragmatic, except for this. that, he's a self-proclaimed Republican.
Yeah.
He did it during his leadership contest.
Right.
And for a Republican, I'm not going to be too hard on him on this, because this is...
He did attend the coronation in London as well.
He did, and it's not the worst thing he's done, because there is a public duty element to what you do, regardless of your own views.
Yeah.
But let's put it this way, he's, for an avowed Republican, he seems to spend a great deal of time at royal ceremonies.
Yes, he certainly does. You did not attend the royal ceremony yesterday.
No, I didn't. I politely declined my invitation.
But you were invited.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why did you not go?
Because it's not real. I mean, let's take it from a monarchist point of view, then certainly from a First Minister should have said, if we've got King Charles, regardless of our views in the future, let's have a proper coronation. Well, let's go to Scone,
right,
where Charles II was coronated in 1651.
Right.
Let's make it proper and historic.
Now, you say coronated, and I heard this the other night.
Yeah.
Is that a different form of crowning?
You stick the crown on somebody's head.
Right.
Yesterday, they had a crown, but they didn't stick it on anybody's head.
Right.
It wasn't a coronation.
So he wasn't.
It was a fake.
Okay, so you call it... Yeah, but what's the difference between coronated and crowned, though?
Well, nothing. Coronated and crowned is two versions of the same word.
Yeah, I thought maybe it was a Scottish version.
Posh folk like me,
yes.
say coronation.
The Lithgow types.
Coronation. I remember it through the carnation milk,
Yes, of course. We all used to drink that. And my mother still puts it in her coffee, if she can get her hands on it. But what about the House of Lords? I want to bring you to that today, because a lot of talk about the bishops. We call him Archbishop Wokeby, who apparently is now in favour of people trafficking. And I was saying earlier today, it's more like the Sermon on the Mount has become, blessed are the human traffickers, because they shall inherit all the money. He seems to want to encourage them to keep bringing people here illegally, and he doesn't want to deport anybody to Rwanda, because that would be inhumane. I think the bishops are an addition that we don't need anymore in the House of Lords, and I'd quite happily do away with the House of Lords and make it into something else.
Well, I agree with him on the Rwanda element of his sermon.
Do you?
Well, I do, because I think the Rwanda policy is stupid. It's silly. It's hyper expensive. It's daft. But the real point is, what on earth is a cleric doing in a legislature? Unless, of course, they stand for election like everybody else should. And what on earth...
Although not everybody else in the House of Lords, obviously.
Well, I'm pointing out, why on earth do we have a House of Lords which is either appointed or, in some cases still, that hereditary or clerical element to it? It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Although I was told today by somebody that actually the 99 hereditary peers actually probably work harder than most of the people who are in there because of whatever it is they've been,
by and large,
given.
Elected politicians who have many deficiencies, and I could start and name them all, but hard work is usually one of their virtues, as opposed to, because they all work like spit to get into the place, and they work like spit to stay in most cases. There's a few in safe seats, lounge about.
Although the story today, and I've put this to two Tory MPs who have both sort of not disagreed with it, it's a piece by Jason Groves in the Mail, that there's a kind of clock watching sort of quality to the way that the House of Commons is currently running. People have they're basically running down the clock until the election. They're not really doing much, and a lot of Tory MPs who know they're just going to give up are not really interested anymore. So we're not really getting the democracy we voted for.
Well, you're saying it should be an early election. It's Mike
I'd rather have an early
Republic
election.
of Mike Graham calling now for an early election.
I've done it before.
I voted no confidence in Rishi Sunak.
I called for an early election. I think it was about this time, about October of last year, I think.
And finally,
just get an election, get it over with.
We found something on which you and Sir Keir Starmer could be on the same side.
Right. Well, he says he wants an early election, but does he really? Because at the moment, I'm not sure he's got enough votes to win a big enough majority to make a difference.
Well, he's certainly not setting the heather on fire.
He really isn't.
But then, of course, he doesn't have to at the present moment, because Rishi Sunak's enabling his succession.
Rishi
anyway.
Sunak has now managed to ruin himself as well as the Tory party. He's gone from 22% approval rating to -2.
Well, that's all right. I thought you meant financially. I was going to say we're all in trouble. If a billionaire can wipe out his money, we're all in trouble.
Even he hasn't managed to do that. But he has managed and this is the Conservative Home website, which is Conservative voters who now have no confidence in him as a leader, and he just don't think he's worth a fag end.
But you know what's really interesting about that? Who's the top? Ben Wallace.
Yeah.
The guy who's turned down the job twice is top.
There's a lot of questions about why he's turned that down. I mean, he wanted to go off and be the head of NATO, didn't he? But Joe Biden's not having any of that. But there's some people who think he doesn't want the scrutiny the top job.
Well, you can understand that in a way. Ben's a hell of a nice guy. I mean, he was in the Scottish...
Very good defence minister.
In the Scottish Parliament before he was in Westminster. Quite an unusual career progression, serving soldier, Scottish Parliament, Westminster Parliament.
Yeah.
So NATO would have been good, but, you know, as you rightly say, the Yanks have the final say as to who gets the NATO
They do.
job.
Well, they do pay for most of it, I suppose. Finally, we should talk about Winnie Ewing, shouldn't we? Winnie Ewing's got a memorial service. I mean, a lot of people... Probably it would be fair to say may not know who she is. So tell us a little bit about Winnie Ewing.
And yet, if we had been sitting here in a studio in the 60s, 70s, everybody would have known who Winnie Ewing. She's a great lady. Her funeral, or her memorial service, is a week on Saturday at Inverness Cathedral. She was a legendary figure. 1967 and her amazing victory in Hamilton. It is to a Scottish nationalist what, I don't know, 1945 would be to a Labour supporter, or 1979 would be to a Tory supporter. She won against all odds a safe Labour seat in a by-election. She basically traumatised the Labour Party. She took the House of Commons by storm. And she put up with total vilification. I mean, people moan about treatment these days, but she was facing an army of 300 Labour MPs scared out of their wits, baying at her. I mean, their behaviour was so bad that Harold Wilson, who was Prime Minister and a thoroughly decent man, had to step in and tell them to behave themselves. So she had conquered all that. She lost her seat.
She didn't need that help, by the way, because she was quite formidable.
No, she was a one-woman army. She lost her seat, and then she came back, defeated the sitting Secretary of State for Scotland in the northeast of Scotland, in Murray and Nairn in 74. When she lost her seat again in 79, within weeks, she won against all the odds the Highlands and Islands seat in the European Parliament. She was indomitable. She could not be put down. She transformed Scottish politics, and it's going to be one of the great privileges of my life to do her eulogy a week on Saturday.
And would the SNP have been what it is? I mean, I hesitate to say what it is now, what it was when you were running it, without her.
No, and she was, by some distance, the most influential Scottish nationalist of the 20th century. You know, after 67, basically London stopped laughing at Scottish nationalism. Now, there's a few chortles again about the SNP and their current travails, but when he transformed the view of Scotland, for the first time, Scottish political aspirations were taken seriously. That's what that woman achieved. Madame Écosse is what they called her.
Yes, I remember that.
In Europe.
Of course.
Mrs. Scotland. A fantastic accolade.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Obviously, we're running very much out of time, but I've got to ask you about the latest, whatever is going on up there. I love the fact that all MPs are now hiding behind this police investigation whenever anybody gets asked a question, not only about what's happening in Scotland, but what's happening in Westminster. They all say, oh, no, we can't say anything. There's a police investigation ongoing, which doesn't in any way actually affect what anybody says. But feel free to use that as an excuse if that's what you're about to do.
I'm a rarity. I'm absolutely unique, because usually what people do is they say there's a police investigation and then they proceed to comment on it. I'm the exception. I'm the one that says there's a live police investigation and I don't comment on it.
There you go.
The cards will fall as they will.
As they will, or where they will, even. Good to see you again, Alex. Thank you very much indeed.